So, we are doing another tier list because apparently people like doing that. And I've got my buddy Tucker here.
How's it going?
He's going to talk to us about some GSC. I think GSC actually kind of pretty cool. Tucker's done a great job of just absolutely wrecking people with GSC. So I thought it would be cool for he and I to hang out a little bit and go through what he thinks is good in the Codex and what he thinks is not so good.
There's there's a good bit of mix in this codex, so can't complain about it too much.
Would you say, like, before we just start slinging stuff, I'm sure this guy's up here, right? But before we do that, do you think like the codex is internally balanced well? Do you think they've done a good job with making all units kind of appear, or do you think there's like some clear front runners?
I think there are definitely some front runners, but I could also see myself taking every single one of these units in different lists, minus maybe one or two. But for the most part, externally maybe not the most balanced codex we've seen this edition, but internally I think they've done a pretty good job of it.
Okay, cool. Honestly, I'm not. That's good. I don't think that's a terrible thing to hear. Obviously, I think some people I think are thinking GSA are pretty underpowered. So I don't know. Let's start with this guy right here, Big Bob,
Mr. Abominant.
Okay.
Yes. So the Abominant got a pretty massive, not massive, but a pretty decent upgrade in the Codex, going up an entire attack with his las cannon equivalent in melee. So now he gets 4 attacks, hitting on 3s of strength 12, AP2, D6 plus 1 damage. And he gives his unit Fight on Death, which isn't the worst thing in the world. And on top of that, he stands back up on a 2-up. All for 75 points. It is it's a pretty cool little unit. He can only lead Aberrants because of his, bulking figure. Everyone else is a little too scared of him. But I personally think he's only really great in one detachment, which is the Biosantic Brood Surge, because it's going to give him that extra attack on the charge and a little extra mobility, which he kind of lacks a bit, only moving 6 inches, no way to advance in charge.
So you can infiltrate him, right? In the Brood Surge?
In the Brood Surge, you can infiltrate him. So he starts, wherever you want him to on the board outside of your opponent's deployment zone, outside of 9. So he hangs out with his gang of goons. If they get charged, they fight on death, albeit not as scary as they were previously, but still something your opponent has to think about. And on top of that, he requires multiple phases of damage to deal with his stand back up on a 2-up. And he stands back up on full wounds, on a toughness 6, 5-up, feel no pain, 5 wound body. It is very, very nice. So makes your opponent think about it pretty hard, and he's a force to be reckoned with on his own too. 4 las cannon attacks in melee is nothing to scoff at.
Yeah,
so,
and for 75 points, honestly, I think that's pretty
you almost
good.
sometimes run him by himself.
That's what I was
to mess
thinking.
with your opponent. He's got deep strike, so you can go wherever you want. I would put him probably solid B tier. Outside of the Biosantic, he doesn't shine too often, so you're not going to see him in a lot of lists. But in Biosantic, I think he's very, very good, almost an auto include with his buddies.
Sweet, I love that.
Who are up next?
So these are their Aberrants.
These are Aberrants. Aberrants, they're a very sad reflection of what they were previously. So they went down from a 4-up feel no pain to a 5-up feel no pain, which some would say is balanced. That people can be wrong, but
yeah, give me back my Mega Knobs too.
Oh God, no, please. You know what? Aberrants can say at a 5-up feel no pain.
Okay, yeah.
And then they went down from strength 8 to strength 7, and they went down from damage 3 to damage 2, which was a really, really big whack on the nose for them.
Did they go down in points?
They did. They did go down relatively, but still 300 points for 10. They get -1 to win if they're being led by a character and your strength is higher than that toughness. But realistically, they're probably around C tier. In Biosantic, you could get about 40 attacks on the charge, infiltrate 10 of them. There's something annoying for your opponents to deal with. Still durable, not as durable as they once were, but they definitely they can tank a little bit more than the average GSC body can.
I feel like these guys, you probably almost always want to run them with the him, right?
Yes.
Because the bodyguard kind of debuff is just so strong, and I don't know. They're okay.
At toughness 6, -1 to wound is yes. There's sometimes where you run them with the Biophagus, who we'll see later, because she gives lethal hits, and one of the detachments gives them crits on 5s, so it kind of gets a little bit of their stomping power back. Because lethals on 5s is just, I mean, basically good in everything in the game. But
very strong.
Yeah, you want a character with them all the time. They're never going to be by themselves unless they're coming back with Cult Ambush. So,
are there any other characters besides this guy that can
just the Abominant and the Biophagus, who's the little scientist girl with the staff.
All right, sweet. Next up, we've got
who's this? The Jackal Alphus. So he's the character bike guy. He gives his unit Fire and Fade, which is very, very strong. And then whatever he shoots at, if he hits, which he has a ballistic skill 3 weapon, the rest of your army rerolls 1s to hit against it for the phase. Which is wonderful, because one of your strongest shooting platforms in this army are the Achilles Ridge Runners, which you can get them to hit on 3s. So getting them to hit on 3s, reroll 1s, and he keeps himself safe with that Fire and Fade. He pops out, gives those reroll 1s, 66% of the time, and then jumps back behind a wall afterwards. On top of that, in Outlander Claw, he makes the Atalan Jackals, which you're almost certainly taking a lot of, very, very good, because it gives them that Scout 9, they move 12, then they Fire and Fade 6, they can reactive move. It just adds another layer of mobility to that unit that they wouldn't have all alone. So
he's pretty good.
Yeah.
How many points is he?
Giving
he's
his
like
unit
50 points, right?
He's like 60, I want to say, something along those lines.
Okay. Is he better than this fella?
I would say he's probably above the Abominant, just because he has a little bit wider use. I'd put him in top of B tier, because you're going to run Achilles Ridge Runners in almost every detachment. It's some of your most consistent anti-tank shooting for very, very cheap. And he really helps, but makes those guys shine, giving them rerolls. So on top of that, he's a Scout 9, Move 12 model that can just go and do stuff if you really need him to. Like if maybe you don't want to recycle behind enemy lines turn 1, you can Scout him 9, Move 12, Fire and Fade 6, and set up a screen, do something funky with him. So he's got a lot more versatility than the Abominant and a lot of the other characters in the Codex. So
yeah, that sounds like a pretty strong combo there. And then look at this.
And then his buddies, the Atalan Jackals. So the Jackals, I don't think that they are the best unit in the Codex, but they are by far and away my favorite unit in the Codex. They have a funky little rule where whenever they move within 6 inches of you, all they need is one model within 6 inches of you. They roll a dice for each Jackal model in the unit, and each 4-ups a mortal wound, which, they also have the grenades keyword to a max of 6. So on average, they're pumping out with grenades a good 8 to 9 mortal wounds a turn, which is just
that is very good,
very terrific. A lot of armies don't have great mortal wound defense. There's some out there, some kind of scary meta menaces like Gladius, Dark Angels with their 4-up feel no pain, Custodes now with a 4-up feel no pain in any phase.
Norn Emissaries.
Norn Emissaries are definitely something that could make these guys not as efficient, but a lot of armies that maybe do have mortal wound defense in the form of a stratagem or something like that are not in the movement phase, which is when these guys do a majority of their mortal wounds. So it can be very difficult to get around them. And then in Outlander Claw, they are horrific with their buttload of things that you can do with them. You can give them a 4-up invuln and shooting. So they're stealth with a 4-up invuln. It makes them survive things that they really, really shouldn't be surviving. You can reactive move them.
There's no way somebody would run 30 of these, right?
Some might say it's crazy to run 30 of these guys, but I think it is the best way to run this codex. Is it the most efficient? Maybe not. Is it the most fun? Definitely.
So you also have a reactive move, right? I'm sorry to cut you off.
Yes, 1 command point reactive move, 1 command point 4-up invuln. If they end up in Cult Ambush after dying, because these guys can come back in Cult Ambush, they're the only non-infantry in the Codex that can do that. You can be very protective and aggressive with their blip, because if your opponent moves within 9 of it, you could pay a CP to move it anywhere on a board edge on the map, which is just very, incredible. Very strong, because it forces your opponent to either get them, because they're going to come back in a very aggressive position, and then if they do that, you can basically rapid ingress them anywhere you want on the board, which is, in that detachment, they are wonderful. Every other detachment, not so much. I would probably put them in a solid top of B tier because when they do shine, they definitely shine.
Would you,
but outside of that,
would you see a world where you run these guys without this guy?
there is, just because you don't get to roll an extra dice for the mortal wounds with him.
Right.
And I was originally running a list where there was a 5-man without one of him just to go up and sticky objectives. Oh, they're also a Scout 9 unit with sticky objectives. So if you go first, you could, on a lot of the missions for Pariah Nexus, you can scout up and sticky objectives before the start of your turn 1, which is also very strong.
And then,
but
and then you can
I think
just move block everybody by putting 10 bikes in their face, right?
Yes, exactly. You move them, you scout 9, you move 12, you fire and fade them, and then after they move their first unit, you move another 6 inches. So
Sheesh.
they are extremely annoying to get around. And they're very difficult to interact with that full 6-inch reactive move for a command point. If they're being played correctly, they could do their mortal wounds to you, and by the time your shooting phase rolls around, they're 17.9 inches away from you, which is a funky little thing to do.
Yikes.
But I do think that there's a world where you can run them without an Alphus in some of the other detachments if you kind of want that Scout 9 unit just to wrap your opponents with. I think most of the time you're going to want the Jackal Alphus with them. Just that fire and fade is too good.
Yep, sounds great. Now we got the new Neurotyrant.
Benedictus.
I'm sure top of S tier.
Right? So I had very high hopes for this unit, seeing it. Its preview. It's got a really cool las cannon attack, so you can either get 1 shot non-hazardous or 2 shots hazardous of strength 12, AP 3, D6 plus 1 damage. And then lethal hits, because he also gives the unit he's leading lethal hits. And then he also has another ability on his datasheet that I almost feel like GW just accidentally miswrote. It says, at the start of any phase, you can activate it and give him a 4-up invulnerable save. Not his unit, but just him, the toughness 3 wound model with a 5-up base save. So it's not great. I had some high hopes for it, but he is unfortunately 80 points, which is more than almost every other character in the Codex. Exactly. And a lot of GSC shooting got nerfed, with the Neophyte Hybrids getting box locked, and then their weapons also got nerfed. Their las cannon equivalents went down to strength 10. Their seismic cannons lost 2 shots apiece. So in a world where Neophytes were what they were, he'd be great because he sits there and he gives them lethal hits. He's okay in the index detachment Host of Ascension because when you deep strike with his unit, they can have lethals and sustained, and you can proc both of those on a 5-up for a command point. But that's only 1 unit, and that's 220 points for a unit that gets no rerolls basically always. So I probably put him bottom of C tier.
That is upsetting because he looks so cool, man.
He looks awesome.
I wish I could run him. I probably could just kit bash him as a Neurothrope or something.
Well, he's very small, so probably a Zoanthrope. But
oh really? Well, the Neurothrope is the same size as a Zoanthrope, but
oh yeah.
What about this guy, Dr. Jekyll?
Oh, the Biophagus. So the Biophagus is very neat. Kind of a flipped coin of the Benefictus. He gives his unit lethal hits, but in melee. And then he also can, once per game, give his unit +1 to wound against an enemy infantry unit. So he's very, very helpful with both making your units deal with monsters with those lethal hits and dealing with other infantry units with that +1 to wound. He also goes like Super Saiyan once per battle and gives himself +3 attacks and +3 damage on his attacks. So he gets 4 attacks of hitting on 3s, anti-infantry 2-up, D3 +3 damage.
That's so
it's AP 0. It's so weird and it's so random, but every once in a while, one of those connects and just absolutely dusts like a custodian or something like that. And it's funny. But
so can you have the Abominant and the Biophagus leading the
can't have both, but they can each lead the Aberrant. But the big thing with the Biophagus is he can also go in other units, like the Acolytes and the Metamorphs and stuff like that. And then he also transfers the keyword of the Biosantic Broodsurge detachment to whatever units he's on. So if he's in a unit in that detachment, he gives them +1 attack and +1 to charge, which, on top of his lethal hits and once per game +1 to wound, for 50 points, he gives his unit a ton of buffs.
50 points.
He's also 50 points. He's basically good in every detachment because you can make his stuff his lethals proc on 5s in Host of Ascension. He makes any melee squad twice as efficient into almost every target. So I probably put him solid top of A tier. Just 50 points is a very difficult price to beat for those kind of buffs.
Nice. Okay, so we got this DJ guy right here.
The Clamavus. He is Clamavus. He's the GSC's no 12-inch deep strike bubble. Doesn't transfer. He also does a weird thing with Battle Shock that nobody ever remembers because Battle Shock is a useless mechanic. But he is very good. 12-inch deep strike deny is just a good rule. There's a lot of 3-inch deep strike in the game between this army, demons, Grey Knights, Inceptors, and Space Marines, all that sort of stuff. He's very, very good at holding your backfield. For 50 points, you put him in a Neophyte squad or by himself, and he just sits back there and screens out your home field objective.
So that sounds like top of B, maybe bottom A.
Definitely top of B. He just because outside of the 12-inch deep strike, he doesn't do much, and there's a lot of matchups where that just won't matter. Like, either they're 9-inch deep striking, so they're going to rapid ingress on you, or they don't have anything in deep strike. He doesn't really do anything but hold your backfield.
Well, he gets you 5 primary every single turn,
Yeah, but there's sticky objectives in the, and you can. He's also only 3 wounds, so if your opponent has marginal indirect, it just kind of.
Oh my gosh, he's not low.
He can kind of just die. He's not low op. He's one of the few characters that is, every character that can join a unit is not low op. So he can unfortunately join a unit. He doesn't give his unit anything either, which is why he's also in B tier. But 12-inch deep strike deny is definitely something. He's also only 50 points. Yeah, so you got an extra 50 points. And your local meta has a bunch of 3-inch deep strike. I'd slam one in a list because he's very good at what he does.
Absolutely.
So, next up is a new addition to the Codex, technically, because they split this datasheet into 2. So these are the Acolyte Hybrids with Hand Flamers, which isn't really what they're most known for. They also get demo charges. So when the Codex came out, Acolytes used to be in one unit. It was just Acolytes. They've split into Acolytes with demo charges and Acolytes with melee weapons. I personally like the Acolytes with Hand Flamers better because they have the rubric rule of reroll once to wound. If your opponent's on an objective, you reroll all wounds.
Yep.
So you can also give them 4 demo charges. I'm definitely top of A tier because their rule is both in shooting and in combat. So if you put a Primus in the unit, then you have 2 phases of pretty good damage with them because for some reason these guys also just have 3 attacks at strength 4, AP 1, damage 1, which you can get up to AP 2 with the Ridge Runner, and then the leader has 5 attacks of strength 5, AP 2, damage 1, which could go up to AP 3 with the Ridge Runner. So they come out, they shoot something with 66 Hand Flamers, 46 demo charges, and then they charge in with 37 attacks of AP 2 and above with full rerolls to hit and full rerolls to wound. So that's very, very cool.
So they do. I really like units like that because they operate in multiple different phases. So that means you could have them come out like you were talking about, shoot something, kill a unit, and then charge and then kill another unit. And these guys are remind me, but they're not super expensive. How much is it?
Nope, 150 points for 10.
Yeah.
So they also get D3 models back, or if you're on an objective, 3 models back in your command phase. They're OC2, they're battle line, so they benefit from all those mission rules.
Tucker, why aren't they here?
The demo charges are not as great as they once were. They don't do a whole lot into tanks. They could pop a Rhino relatively consistently if it's on an objective. But demo charges went from strength 12, D6 plus 3 shots, to strength 9 d6 shots.
Yeah.
So,
okay. So not
and they
S.
hit on 5s.
Oh, they hit on 5s. I didn't realize
In
that.
shooting. In melee, they hit on 3s,
Okay.
but the demo charges hit on 5s. So if your opponent has smokescreen or stealth or, any -1 to your weapon or ballistic skill, they kind of flump because they don't have a whole lot of access to +1 to hit. But if your opponent doesn't, then they'll walk up, pop a rhino, and then charge and kill whatever was the rhino.
Gotcha.
And they're great at doing that. So you also want to take a Primus in every single one of your lists because he gives you 3 redeploys. And he's 90 points, so not giving him a unit to give full to hit to feels like a waste of points. So you usually just want to slot him in with these guys because they don't really need any detachment rules to do well. They just kind of do it on their own.
Nice. All right, and this truck, this
Goliath
is not the
truck.
Goliath. Okay, Goliath's pretty
It
good,
is the Goliath,
right?
but it's the truck. The Goliath truck is pretty decent. It's a Rhino chassis, toughness 9, 10 wounds, 3-up save. It gets 1 twin autocannon, so 2 shots, strength 9, AP 1, 3 damage. Some heavy stubber shots, and then a cache of demolition charges. Its shooting's not really what you take it for. It's 85 points for dedicated transport, and it has the fire support keyword. So whatever gets out of it gets full rerolls to wound at whatever it shot at. So
Oh my gosh.
in the shooting phase.
That's very good.
So you put your acolytes with demo charge, and if for some reason your opponent didn't stand on an objective, you still have access to that full rerolls to wound, at least in the shooting phase. And he's basically the only transport that this army has. So if you want to transport, you're definitely taking him. Middle of A tier.
I would guess
pretty
here.
much. Yes, exactly. Only reason he's not higher is you need to put something in him to do anything. He's not going to do much on his own. So, but beyond that, he's a great piece. He's everything you want out of a transport, and that's what we love.
Sweet. So this guy
is the Locus. So the Locus gives fight first to the unit that he's in, and he gives characters in the unit he's in a 4-up Feel No Pain. Which
what units can he lead?
He can lead basically everything except for Aberrants and Bikes. So Metamorphs, Acolytes, and Neophytes. You won't put them in Neophytes because they're not a melee unit. But and the other really big thing with the Locus is that he can be in a unit even if there's another character in that unit, depending on what kind of character it is. So you can put that 4 rolls to hit guy in a unit and then put a Locus in with him, which makes units like that ridiculously strong because you can stage it behind walls for a funky little heroic intervention where they just wipe whatever they can. He's also 5 attacks hitting on 2s of strength 5 AP2 damage 2 by himself.
Wow.
So he's not a joke in combat.
How many points?
50 points. It's very on theme.
I think
I put him in top of A, possibly S tier. You're almost taking him. Sorry, he's 45 points.
Oh my gosh! I would say bottom S tier. That's so many rules.
Any melee unit that he is in, that is in your army, you want. If you're running a melee GSC army, you're taking 3 of these guys.
Wow, I had no idea.
Yeah, he is just good. That's it. He's just good. There's not much more to say about that.
We got Magus next, right?
The Magus. Oh boy. Definitely the first D tier unit. So for 50 points, at the beginning of your opponent's shooting phase, she points at a unit within 18, rolls a dice. On a 1, she does D3 mortals to herself, which is important because she only has 3 wounds. Actually, she might have 4 wounds now, but I'm pretty sure she only has 3. So she could just kill herself randomly. She's got 4 wounds now, so she'd have to do it twice. On a 2-up, you give that unit -1 to hit.
She's got
on
4
a 6,
wounds? We do that.
Right? Yeah, exactly. And then on a 6, she gives her unit -1 to wound in the shooting phase. She also gives her unit a 5-up Feel No Pain against Psychic and Mortal Wounds, which I guess maybe with the new Devastating Wounds change, maybe.
That's terrible.
But you're not taking units for durability in this detachment.
The reason why I think this is terrible is because there's too many conditions for any of her rules to do anything.
All of her rules are just, you're not, outside of Aberrants, you're really not teching into durability with this army. So the -1 to hit, -1 to wound, on your toughness 3 to 4, 5-up save bodies, is just not
Yeah.
going to do anything
Yeah.
80% of the time. The only time you take her is there's a detachment, Xenocreed Congregation, where a unit gets an enhancement that every time you make a cult ambush roll once per battle round, you can re-roll it if you fail it, as long as that unit was a battle line unit. So she's okay at having that enhancement and sitting at the back of your battlefield. But even then, there's better choices for her. She's just the cheapest one.
Excellent.
So definitely D tier. Not great.
Is this the Icon
next up
bearer?
is the Iconward, the Acolyte Iconward. So he is pretty funky. He gives whatever unit he's in a 5-up Feel No Pain for everything. So just straight up better than the Magus for the same points cost, I believe. Maybe within 5 points of each other. And if that unit already has a 5-up Feel No Pain, he gives it a 4-up Feel No Pain. He has Scout 6, which is really important because the unit that he normally goes with are the hybrid Metamorphs. They have Scout 6 and a 5-up Feel No Pain. So he gives them a 4-up Feel No Pain. And lets them keep their Scout 6 despite having a leader attached to them because he also has Scout 6, which is very good. And then he also has an ability where once per game, if someone comes within 9 of your cult ambush, you can reset it up within 6 inches of him. So,
and he doesn't have to be anywhere near that cult ambush marker, right?
No, you have to set it up within 6 inches of him.
Oh, but I mean when it triggers.
Oh yes, when it triggers, no. It's
excellent.
It's just anywhere on the battlefield, you reset it up there. The only issue with that is that typically he's got Scout 6 and he leads melee units, so he really wants to be in combat, which kind of screws with that because you're going to have him near your opponent. So you don't want your cult ambush markers near your opponent necessarily.
Right.
But one of the really cool things he does is the unit that he leads, the Metamorphs, have a either D6 inches or flat 6-inch blood surge move every time they get shot, which normally on a GSC unit wouldn't be that great because they're not very durable and you can kill them in one activation a lot of the times. But when they have that 4-up Feel No Pain, he makes them kind of funky. I'd probably put him in bottom of B tier, above the Abominant.
Really? That low?
He doesn't really do much outside of that 4-up Feel No Pain unit. And the other issue is that unit can't have more than one character attached, and he doesn't buff their melee in any way, or shooting. So he kind of buffs their durability, and he gets a couple attacks at AP1 by himself, but you really want melee buffers to be in the units with him. So
all right.
he kind of just funks. That is the Kelermorph. Easily the best unit in the Codex, just maybe outside of one. Kelermorph got a huge glow up in the Codex, so he used to get to 3-inch deep strike and shoot at something after it shot at a battle line nearby him. But now he gets 6 shots of Strength 6 AP2 damage 1, hitting on 2s with dev wounds. So, on average, a dev wound and a couple AP2 saves into something T6 or below. But his really, really big rule is that he's lone op, and if you come within 12 inches of if an enemy unit moves within 12 of him, he moves D6 inches. So if your opponent wants to charge or shoot him, they have to come within 12 inches of him, and then he can move D6 inches, which makes him ridiculously good at standing out on an objective, because a lot of the times he might not be able to get to the other side of the wall with a D6-inch move, but he can get within heroic range of one of those fight first units with a Locust, and then your opponent charges him and gets hit by the Acolytes first. So he's wonderful at sitting out. He's only 60 points.
Wow.
He has decent shooting, and he's always basically going to get to shoot 2 or 3 times before he dies. It's just all around an amazing unit. Every list is going to have 3 of them unless they're trying something skewy, but it doesn't get better than the Kelermorph.
It sounds like GSC is doing a lot of Hero Hammer, honestly.
It is a lot of Hero. It's been Hero Hammer since 7th edition. They just keep giving us more characters, which is great. I love the GSC characters.
I think some more units
basically, yeah, more units would be nice. with Brood Brothers, there was a bit of a help with that, but there's not really Brood Brothers anymore, unfortunately. But yeah, every list of mine usually has 700 to 800 points of characters.
Whew.
Just, you need them to buff your units, you need them to be your scoring pieces, your skirmish pieces, all that sort of stuff. So they get a little funky.
Nice.
These are the Acolyte Hybrids with melee weapons, auto pistols technically, but take them for their auto pistols. They can have 6 of those little drill weapons in their squad, which are 2 attacks apiece of strength 5, AP 2, damage 3, anti-vehicle 4+. They're not exactly great. There's a lot of ways to give them +1 attack, sometimes +1 weapon skill. Obviously, you can give them full rerolls to hit with the Primus in their squad. But the main issue with them is that they have a very big lack of rerolls to wound. And only being strength 5, they're not great at wounding infantry, wounding them either on 3s, 4s, or 5s for some of those like custody equivalent infantry. And you're wounding vehicles on 4s, which anti-vehicle 4-up's cool, but you've only got 12 attacks and no rerolls to wound. So they can be extremely swingy. They do generate a CP for you on a 4-up if they're on an objective, which is neat, I guess. But for 70 points, not the greatest objective holders in the world. Probably put them middle of C tier. They don't have good shooting either. If they have the melee weapons, they lose all guns, and then the guys without the melee weapons get auto pistols. Which,
yikes.
Yeah,
I think I would always take an Aberrant. Well, I mean, they play different roles, but like
exactly, they're way cheaper than Aberrants, but they need character support. Oftentimes, they need stratagem support. They're just very, very meh. You almost want to put like 3 characters in them all the time, but you can't put 3 characters, and then that would also just be ridiculously expensive. They're relatively slow. They can advance and charge in one of the detachments, but no scout. They move 6. They can deep strike. They're just
I just feel like
they're not as good as their Acolyte buddies.
If you're trying to do all of that, you're just polishing a turd at that point.
Yes, exactly.
You can
and when you
so
could just
many
take
things on it. But.
Exactly. When you could just take their buddies with demo charges and 4 rolls to wound, for 5 points more per 5-man, you do that every day of the week. Do that. So, yeah, that's that. These are the hybrid Metamorphs. All of these Acolyte and hybrid units look very similar. But the hybrid Metamorphs are what we were talking about earlier, that 5-up feel no pain, that blood surge. They either get 5 attacks at strength 4, AP 1, damage 1, or they get 3 attacks at strength 5, AP 1, damage 2. So they have like a sweep or a smash profile, which, can be useful depending on the situation. The big issue, the glaring issue with them is that they do not get the rule where they can be led by 2 units. So you really got to pick and choose your buffs with them. You can either have 4 rolls
so you
to
can't
hit,
have this guy and the Locus.
Exactly. You can either have the 4-up feel no pain, fight first, 4 rolls to hit, or lethals and +1 to win against infantry. If they could have 2 characters, they would be absolutely amazing. They'd be good at everything that they do. They're still very good. In Biosantic Brood Surge, you can get them up to 40 damage 2 attacks or 60 damage 1 attacks. In other detachment, you can give them lethals on 5s. They scout 6, so you could also just take 5 of them for 80 points, but you don't really want to do that. I probably put them solid top of B tier, because when they do hit, they hit pretty hard. I mean, 60 attacks is just nothing to be scoffed at, especially when you can buff the AP and stuff with Ridge Runners. So,
do you think maybe bottom of A?
Bottom of A would be, I could see bottom of A. That 4-up feel no pain.
They seem so much better than this guy. Like this guy, he's got a great ability.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
But they are just, and that blood surge really makes your opponent play honest, especially if they have that 4-up feel no pain.
Right.
Because if your opponent has an army with a lot of different shooting activations, they can become kind of a pain to deal with, which is kind of funky. But they're also more expensive than all the other Acolytes, only by 10 points a squad, but still, points that up. So
nice.
Those are the Neophyte Hybrids, the last battle line choice. So Neophytes in Index were very, very good, much more expensive than they currently were. A full 20-man squad went from 180 to 140 points in the Codex. So they went from 90 for 10 to 70 for 10. They used to have pretty good shooting. They still have okay shooting. All their heavy weapons hit on 5s. Their normal weapons hit on 4s. But they've kind of changed roles. They're a lot cheaper. They have sticky objectives now. So it's nothing terrible. And they get D3+3 models back in your command phase, which is also pretty neat. They are okay in Host of Ascension because they can get a bunch of different buffs when they deep strike in and start shooting at people. But you don't really want them to be shooting anymore. You want them to be kind of annoying, either action monkeys or holding your home field, because they're not as prone to being indirected to death because they get D3+3 guys back each turn. And GSC also has an issue with a lot of low leadership units. So sticky objectives can be very, very good for them, because if they fail those leadership tests against something like Tyranids with Shadows in the Warp, you could still hold primary and stuff like that. So still decent, just a very, very different role than they previously filled.
All right.
Probably bottom of A tier, top of B tier. 70 points for a sticky objective unit that grows models
good.
back is just,
yeah. I do like that. And they're OC2?
They're OC2. They are also a 10-man squad. It's 70 points for 20 OC with sticky.
Yeah, I like that.
Definitely far from bad.
Yeah.
So, next up is the Nexus, the real Mr. DJ. He's got his big disc right there.
Oh, he's jamming.
He's jamming hard. So he gets a couple cool abilities. He is the GSC captain equivalent. He reduces the cost of a stratagem by 1 once per battle round. Pretty cool, because we have a lot of very, very good strategies in Genestealer cults. So it's only to whatever unit he's leading. He's 60 points. He can join basically all the units in the Codex outside of Aberrants and Atalan Jackals. He is 60 points, which puts him about 10 points higher than a lot of the other characters. And he does take up one of those character slots that could go to buffing their melee. He doesn't do any melee on his own. He doesn't do any shooting on just buffs. He also lets you move a Cult Ambush token 6 inches during each player's command phase, which can kind of get funky, but doesn't really do a whole lot. Because usually once you put a Cult Ambush token down, you got a general idea of where you want it to be.
So you
and he also has to be on the board for that.
You want to play this guy if you have like some stratagems that you really want to activate.
Exactly. That Host of Ascension detachment, where you have that like lethal hits on 5 stratagem, or critical hit on 5 stratagem. You put him in a squad that already gets, sustained and lethals with a Primus from the enhancement, and, they just go to town. You really want him to be alive over multiple turns, which can be a struggle for GSC because a lot of your stuff dies and characters never come back with Cult Ambush. So I probably put him bottom of B tier because, cheap stratagems are just good some of the times. But a lot.
I feel like he's worse than Aberrants, though.
They're very different. He needs to be with the correct unit in order to do what he wants to do. He's very good at buffing whatever unit he's in. He just won't ever do anything by himself is the issue.
Gotcha.
So, and then once your units kind of get whittled down, he loses a lot of his. And it's also another 60 points that you're putting on a squad to buff them, which just, you're racking up those points in characters. It starts to get expensive. So
yeah. Okay, but the free strat is pretty good.
The free strat or cheapened strat is also very good. So, because GSC also has a very big CP problem as well. So, he's good at doing that, helping with that. So, that is the Patriarch, the Broodlord's little brother. So, he is pretty good in melee. He gets 5 attacks at Shrink 6, AP 2, Damage 2, Twin Linked. He has Advance in Charge. He gives his unit Dev Wounds. The only unit he can lead, Purestrain Genestealers, which is fine because that's really who you want to be giving Dev Wounds to. He makes everything within 6 take a Battle Shock at the beginning of the fight phase, or once per game, everything within 12 take a battle shock at the beginning of the fight phase, which isn't nothing. If you're scared of your opponent interrupting or something, there's a chance he could shut it down. Or maybe he stops, something like a Renegade Raiders from jumping back into a Rhino after it fights or something like that. Every once in a while it comes into play.
Does he have to be in engagement range to pop that?
No, it's just at the beginning of the fight phase. It's
really
any fight phase too. And once per game it could be 12 inches. So he can get a little funky with some things. He also gives his unit Dev Wounds, and in Biosantic Brood Surge, Genestealers are 5 attacks apiece.
Woo!
So 50 attacks hitting on 2s with Dev Wounds. You're just kind of gonna put like 10-ish Dev Wounds into your opponent with his Twin Link Dev Wound. And then also in Biosantic Brood Surge, he has access to an enhancement that gives him +1 AP and +1 damage to his melee. And he just becomes a real monster with
I've played
6 attacks on the charge.
No, thank you, dude. He's so good. I would think either bottom of S or
I'd probably put him bottom of A. Bottom A. The only issue with him, he is 85 points, which, isn't the cheapest thing in the world. He's not the most wonderful thing without that enhancement. So there's that. He does move a advance in charge. I mean, he is great. I just think that there are other units that are better than him. And if he doesn't get to do what he really wants to do, he can kind of just flunk. So he also just only has a 4-up invuln, so he's pretty squishy. But he can also only lead one unit. But I still love him. The Patriarch, he's also only an epic hero. I think if you could take 3 of them, he'd be very, very good, because you'd run 30 units of Genestealers and 3 of those guys. But he's get this weird treatment where he is an epic hero, but he can take enhancements. I don't really know why, but they did. So
I feel like GSC kind of fall into this hole of there's some decisions that the rules made because of the flavor of the army, and I feel like it's one of those armies where the flavor definitely makes the army worse.
Yes, there's definitely flavor in there, and everything kind of does what it would do in the lore, but it, that's not the best for competitive play all the time.
Yeah, which is a shame, but it is kind of cool.
It is kind of cool.
Captain Jack Sparrow.
Next up, the Primus, my favorite little buddy. He's definitely probably bottom S tier, maybe even above the Locust. But he gives his unit full rerolls to hit, which is just wonderful.
Can he lead
as
these
long
guys?
As you have, he can lead those guys. That's what makes him very, very silly. Yes, he turns them for 240 points. He turns them into some monsters with full rerolls to hit, full rerolls to wound. So he also gets 5 attacks at strength 5, AP 2, damage 1 on his own. So he's not a chump in melee. And then he also has a rule where as long as you have at least one of him in your army on the board or, in Deep Strike or whatever, you get to redeploy 3 units. Yeah. Which, on top of just you're taking him already for his full rerolls to hit, he also has another ability that is just amazing.
That's really
like a lot of those units with 2 data, 90 points.
90 points for that. Yeah,
which could get a little steep. But he can also join with other models, so you could put him and a Locus together with the Acolyte Hybrids, and just make some serious nuke squads. Because him and his Locus buddy combined for like 9 strength 5 AP 2 attacks, some of them damage 2. So,
yikes.
Yep.
Yeah, he's great.
Just a very, very good. And then next up are the Purestrain Genestealers. Definitely better than their buddies over in Tyranids, I think, at least. At what they want to be doing.
I don't know about that.
Probably about middle of A tier. Infiltrate and advance in charge is one hell of a drug on an 8-inch unit, on an 8-inch move unit. The other big thing with Purestrain Genestealers is you can take that big 10-man blob of them, and if you win that first turn or first drop roll off, you could string them all across the midfield so your opponent doesn't get any infiltrates, and then redeploy them to wherever they want to go in their little hidey hole.
And you do that because you're going to have at least one of these in your army.
Because you're going to have at least one Primus. Exactly. So, They are not chumps in melee. 4 attacks, strength 4, AP 2, damage 1. Sometimes 5 attacks, depending on the detachment. They're only 75 points for 5 of them for a wonderful skirmish unit, because 5 is 20 attacks at strength 4, AP 2, damage 1, with move 8, advance and charge. So definitely not nothing there. They can come back on a 4-up turns 1 and 2, which is when they're dying most of the time anyways, because you want them to just run out and skirmish and stuff like that. When you put them with the Patriarch, they become absolute monsters. In Biosantic Brood Surge, you can give them +1 to wound against vehicles and monsters, turn them into, some monster killers. All around, just very, very good data sheet. I'd probably put them right behind the truck, just for their versatility and everything.
Nice.
You can pick them as
I was wrangling my cat. He's trying to climb on the keyboard. So I'll put him right behind the truck, you think?
right behind the truck. Yep.
Perfect.
Just very versatile. You can either have a nice little nuke unit, or you can have tiny skirmish pieces that move ridiculously fast. Your opponent has to respect them because they infiltrate and advance in charge while moving 8. So they just it's hard to beat that.
Zoom in. Reductus.
Zoom in.
Let me guess on Reductus.
Oh, you could probably guess with the Reductus.
I think she's probably here.
I think your stream might be frozen.
What about now? I put the Reductus behind the Primus.
Yes, that's probably a pretty accurate spot for her. 1 second.
Because she's got Lone Up, and when you come close to her, you can pop some bombs. Also has a pretty good ranged weapon.
The Reductus, very, very good. She infiltrates. She has Lone Up. She has Stealth. All of the funny keywords. All the very good keywords. She did get nerfed. She has a little mine where if you come within 9 inches of her 2-up, you take D3 +3 mortals, which just is not a small amount of mortals. And she can grenade for free, double up on grenades. She has one of those demo charges and shooting, but hers hits on 2s because she's awesome. She gets a D6 +3, strength 5, AP 0, damage 1 indirect gun as well with a 24-inch range. And she's just all around good at basically everything she does. Because you take 2 or 3 of them with a couple Ridge Runners, all of a sudden you're blowing Gretchen off of backfield objectives, maybe picking up some Space Marines in indirect. Some Gargoyle squads is really big. I know. Kill those Gargoyles. Because her indirect can go up to AP1 ignores cover with the Ridge Runner buffs, which just makes her very, very funky. So,
and it's like
probably
one
not
of those,
as good.
It's one of those pieces where you put it in the middle of the board, and anybody wanting to kind of like take over presence in the board or like take a no man's land objective, it's tough because they don't want to move close to this. So basically they have to dedicate 2 units in order to take an area that the Reductus is like controlling, because they don't
or one big unit.
Right. But then they're putting way too many resources into, just because of this silly little character, which is phenomenal.
165-point character, which is just, she infiltrates. You can put her next to that big squad of Purestrain Genestealers. So if your opponent decides they want to run up on turn 1, they're going to take a bunch of mortals before they can hit them, which will usually help the Purestrain survive. Or she could just go stand on an objective by herself and indirect something for the entire game.
Indirect is still powerful, in my opinion.
Indirect is still very good. Yeah, especially when you're just also getting it on top of something that you would already be taking. Because you take her without the indirect. In my opinion, the indirect is a wonderful little bonus. So, only reason she's probably not top of S tier is the Kelermorph is much more finicky and difficult to interact with. So that 12-inch reactive move is very, very good. But she also does quite a bit of damage by herself. She'll pop a Rhino on her own if it into her mine range because of the free grenades. So she can get funky.
Do you think she's better than the? Do you think she's better than the Primus?
Probably not better than the Primus. Okay. Probably put him just below the Primus. That going from a 12-inch or to a 9-inch for the bombs makes her a little bit easier to interact with.
Yeah.
So a lot of units that can like maybe fire invade or something can come within 9 and shoot at, or come within 9.1, shoot at her, and then fire and fade on an objective, something like that. But still very, very, very good. The infiltrate is what really puts her above. So after her is the Achilles Ridge Runner, which I think all the way to the top of S tier. Probably one of the best units. Top of S tier. That is just easily probably the best unit in the Codex. You could argue between him and the Kelermorph. But the Ridge Runner is an auto include of at least 2 in every single list, in my opinion. Probably 6 or 4.
And just from somebody who's played against GSC, I think it's because of, one, they have really good guns. Like the Blast Last Cannon is just weird and very
Silly.
good. And then the AP buff persists throughout the entire turn. So like you have you have these guys who are normally AP 1, right? But if you just like shoot a stubber at one unit and then shoot your weird las cannons at a different unit, and then say, okay, the stubber unit is going to get plus to the AP, and then these guys become a blender. Like AP2 is such a huge breaking point.
Or AP3 Genestealers. And you can give these guys an indirect gun too. So they can sit at the back and hold your home field and give that +1 AP buff. Or they can take las cannons and they can become ballistic skill 3, which makes them very efficient. So, and then if they're having to shoot, and if you're playing against an army that maybe doesn't have as many vehicles, their las cannons are still very good into infantry units because of the blast. Wow. So into something like Custodes, like a guard squad, 5 custodians, you'd get 2d3 +2 las cannon shots into them, which is just incredible. Or into Terminators, you'd get 2d3 +4 las cannon shots. The AP buff changing in the Codex from just affecting shooting to affecting shooting and melee was a huge buff for these guys. They're very good in every detachment.
Tucker, I'm going to go out on a limb. First, has the FAQ came out for GSE yet?
They have not.
Okay. I'm going to go out on a limb where there is maybe a world where that was a mistake.
I don't know, because my only thing is, if it were a mistake, why would they change the wording at all?
That's true. I don't know.
Why wouldn't they just... But yes, you could be right.
We know GW, but I think they do weird stuff sometimes.
Yeah, GW could just be kind of funky, and maybe they were like, "Man, this codex is terrible. Let's give them a little pat on the back," and they let us have our silly little Ridge Runner. So
yeah,
after the Ridge Runner,
very good.
Yeah, is the Rockgrinder, which is an unfortunate hollow shell of previous.
I'm gonna guess. Does it transport?
It does. It's transport 6. So you can't take your big 10-man block. It also doesn't give full rolls to wound to whatever gives out. So it doesn't really support them in any way. The issue with the Rockgrinder is it used to do a cool little grenade on the charge, where after it finished charging, you'd roll 6 dice and each 4-up was immortal. So you could do that, and then it had a strength 10 drill. So you could also then tank shock with it. Just do a bunch of mortal wounds. You could sit a Reductus inside and a 5-man squad of Acolytes. They could get out. The Acolytes would grenade for a CP. The Reductus would grenade for free. It would charge in, do its charge mortals, then tank shock. Unfortunately, they changed that datasheet rule to your opponent has to take a desperate escape test when they want to fall back from the Rockgrinder.
Oh, no.
Which is... it's something. Desperate escape tests, sorry, they could be funky every once in a while. But most of the time, they just do a big old heaping pile of nothing. The Rockgrinder doesn't fly. Very easy to string out models in front of it, so it just can't charge anything. It's got a pivot now, so it can move 12 inches. No way to advance and charge. No way to buff its movement. Can't go through walls. Transports less than its truck buddy. Has a very whelming gun. It has either 2d6 heavy flamer shots or d3 las cannon shots, but its las cannons can't have the spotter, so they don't hit on 3s, which just they
what's its toughness?
It's I believe actually it might be toughness 10. I think that they gave the Rockgrinder toughness 10.
So hear me out.
But
I feel like there's a world where it holds 6, right? Like you bring it out, put it in the center of the field. I think you take the flamers, right?
Oh, 100%, all the time.
If somebody comes up, you can Overwatch, whatever. If they charge, then you still have something in there, and it's like, okay, how many points is it?
It's 120.
Okay, never mind.
That's
all my plans went out the window. You said 120. I was thinking.
You said it, yeah.
This guy, the other truck is like 85.
The other truck? Yeah, the other truck is 85 points, almost 40 points cheaper.
All right, so I put him below Aberrants in C tier.
I'd put him bottom of C tier, honestly. The other things will, kind of get a little funky, but he can have -1 damage for a command point in the Outlander Claw detachment. The issue is that he doesn't have an invuln, and you don't have a lot of other vehicles in GSC, so someone's just going to put all their anti-vehicle weapons into it anyways, because the rest of your army is just infantry. So the -1 damage just isn't enough. It can't do the 4-up invuln from Outlander Claw, so it's just a 3-up save, toughness 10 model, which, sure, I guess, but nope. No. Compared to his buddy, the truck, it's just not. If
he was -1 damage all the time, which he used to have that rule, right?
He used to have that. Both of the trucks did. But yeah, if he was -1 damage all the time, it would be really cool. But he's not, so he's not very cool.
All right. Last but not least, or maybe. No,
that's it. The Sanctus. The Sanctus,
right.
he's okay. So the Sanctus, he has 2 different war gear abilities, which affect his datasheet ability. So he can either take the Sanctus sniper rifle, or he can take the Sanctus dagger, called something like that. So the datasheet ability he always gets is Psychic Spore, which is at the start of the first battle round. You select an enemy unit to be its prey, and every time you make an attack that targets, you reroll all hits and all hits. So, okay. If you give him the dagger, he can't ever be overwatched, which is something. Usually people aren't going to be overwatching your 3-wound character that could probably die to a Rhino combat if it swings up. But the big one is if you give it the sniper rifle, anytime an enemy unit ends or fall back within 9 of it, it can move a full 6 inches.
Yeah, that's great.
He infiltrates, he deep strikes, he has lone op, it's neat. The only issue with it is in front of it, with that role of making it annoying for your opponents to move places, you're going to take a Kelermorph over him, because the Kelermorph is a 12-inch bubble. You're going to take the Reductus over him, because the Reductus just does a ton of damage outside of its ability. So he kind of falls third in line in this awkward place, where, he's a good datasheet, but you're not going to take him over your other options, is the unfortunate bit.
I feel like he is middle B tier.
Middle B tier is definitely... I will also say his melee is 6 attacks of hitting on 2s, strength 3, AP 2, damage 2, but anti-infantry 3-up with precision, and then he gets full rerolls to hit, full rerolls to against 1 hit. So, sometimes he can just go up and mince a character out of a squad, but he has to get there first, and he can kind of struggle to do that. So you really want to take him for the objective play, but you also don't want to take him over the Kelermorph. So that's kind of where it lands him in that spot. So the Kelermorph is just, you won't take much over the Kelermorph, but he just feels like a worse Kelermorph. The full 6 versus the D6 is something, but if you play your Kelermorphs right, all you ever need is the D6-inch move.
Because he's on such a small base.
Yeah, exactly. He's on a 32. You just put him right up against a wall, and then, jumps back to the other side, or jumps within heroic range of another unit.
And
then he gets to shoot something. Yeah, that's the other thing, is the Kelermorph gets to do something when he jumps away. Whereas the Sanctus
the guns
doesn't.
the weapons aren't really, really worth it, right? It's just
the dagger is funky because of the 6 attacks of AP 2 damage to anti-infantry 3-up, rerolling all hits and wounds. But the sniper is only damage 3 precision. so it's not really going to kill most characters in the game.
No.
If it were damage 4, maybe pop a Space Marine Captain. But if your opponent fails their save and doesn't make it, they're just kind of like, okay, that's fine. I still have a wound on my character,
Right.
And you don't have any other precision. So
oh wait, hold on, Tucker. He's really good into other GSC.
Oh my god! If you ever run into that mirror match, you can never be too sure.
Yeah. All right. So
it would be crazy.
I put him above the Abominant.
Yeah, that seems fair. Just for objective play, he's also cheaper than the Kelermorph by 10 points. To be fair.
Yeah.
So there's that. If you're like, oh, I want a Kelermorph, but I only have 50 points in my list, I'll take a Sanctus.
Sweet.
It's just the Dollar Tree version of the Kelermorph.
The Walmart, if you will.
The Walmart, the general brand. So.
All right. So before we head out, just a recap of where we put everything. S tier, we have the Ridge Runner, the Kelermorph, the Primus, the Reductus, the Locus, and then we have in A tier, we have Dudes with Flamers and the Demo Charges, right? We have the truck. What's the transport truck called?
The Goliath Truck.
The Goliath. Then we have Purestrain. Then we have the Biophagus. Then we have the melee Neophytes. Is that right?
No, the melee one should be in bottom of C tier. Oh, you're talking about the Metamorphs.
Metamorphs.
Yeah.
Sweet. And then these guys are the Neophytes?
Yep, Neophytes.
And then Patriarch. Then we got the oh my gosh. I don't know why I tried to do this.
It was worth a try.
Yeah. But then I think the codex just kind of wraps up after this.
After that, you're not, you might see some of those units in skew matchups or skew lists, but really, those A and S tier ones, you're going to see a lot of GSC. I mean, for all those GSC lists that are out there, 6 of them, you're definitely going to see those units. So, I think it's also important to note that this is, in my mind, for the internal balance of GSC. I don't think a Sisters S tier unit is the same as a GSC S tier unit.
Right.
But I think in the context of this codex, those units belong up there in S tier.
Well, I think GSC, they do certain things very well. I think there's some armies that we'd absolutely love to have a Sanctus.
Exactly.
But he is so low in B tier because there's so many other GSC units that just do what he does, but
that fill that role so much better. Yeah.
But I think that also warrants a incredibly high skill ceiling with Genestealer cults, because the things that they do well, you can win with, and you can win with very well, but it's not easy to do that. You really, really have to be careful with your positioning.
You really have to be careful, and you almost have to play as if you don't have an no army rule.
Right.
Because lying back on that cult ambush, relying on it is just extremely inconsistent. If you're making your game plans out of it, it's just going to make you sad every single time.
Yikes.
So, not great to rely on hitting 4 or even 5 ups.
Yeah.
Maybe relying on 1 or 2 units a game just to go do some actions at the end of the game, especially because they don't get their characters back. So even if they do come back, they're marginally worse than they were.
Right.
Exactly. So,
it
feels funky.
Tucker, thanks for hanging. Thanks to everybody else for
sure.
Watching or listening to our latest tier list. We're hoping to get a couple more of these out pretty soon. That's it. Let us know what you thought. Like, comment, subscribe, always, of course. And I'll see you Wednesday. Bye-bye.
See you Wednesday.